In the pre-dawn stillness of Dubai, the city's skyline shimmered with promise as the first sunrise rays glanced off its crystalline towers. Beneath that opulent panorama, the prestigious Dubai Global Investment Center stood poised for another day of world-altering deals. Inside its vast expanse of marble and glass, the atmosphere was electric, a symphony of hushed negotiations, whispered confidences, and the quiet rustle of opportunities being brokered. The lobby filled with sleek black Mercedes and Rolls-Royce phantoms, disgorging entourages of dignitaries, financiers and power brokers from across the globe. Oil ministers in tailored suits strode purposefully across the marble floors, sovereign wealth fund managers consulted advisors, Chinese infrastructure executives, their bearing precise and resolute, navigated the crowd that congregated for the Dubai International Business Forum. Each arrival, each business card exchanged, carried the weight of billions in potential. Conversations unfolded in a dozen languages, Arabic, English, Mandarin, French, Russian, Portuguese, as translators flitted between the clusters of elite clans. Every gesture, every laugh, every sip of Turkish coffee had the faintest chance of reshaping regional economies and rerouting capital flows for generations. At 9:47 a.m., as CNN International readied its first panel, amid the organized hum of global finance, a solitary figure entered the building's side entrance. He neither drew a retinue nor flashed security credentials. Clad in a charcoal suit of understated refinement and a modest silver watch, Ibrahim Trorore, the president of Burkina Faso, moved forward alone, and unnoticed. Inside, his quiet demeanor concealed a mien of quiet authority. To most present, he was just another delegate, a peripheral African leader whose inference into the elite ecosystem of global finance drew scant attention. British petroleum executives chatted animatedly about North Sea finds, German renewable energy investors debated turbines, African Development Bank delegates strategized. Trorore blended into the backdrop, a neutral presence on an international stage curated not for countries like Burkina Faso. In their high finance calculus, this landlocked West African nation was too small, its economy too modest to matter. That misjudgment, however, would prove ruinously consequential for all in attendance. At the head of the forum, Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum presided with ingrained majesty, the precision architect of Dubai's global transformation. He surveyed the agenda, stacking meetings with titans of energy, infrastructure and wealth management, Saudi ministers, Chinese conglomerates, Norwegian pension funds, all aligned toward initiatives that reshaped global economic topology. Absent among them, any serious engagement with Burkina Faso. Meanwhile, Trorore found a seat in the third row of the main auditorium, an observer among elites, his mind attuned to the silent choreography that governed these gatherings, the manners, the protocol, the power dynamics that determined who got to speak and who stayed silent. As minister after executive graced the stage with polished speeches on diversification and digital transformation, with their vast ambitions but thin deliverables, Trorore took mental notes. This was the script of inequality wherein rich countries preached to poorer ones. Then, the expected collapse occurred. At 11:23 a.m., the scheduled speaker on sub-Saharan emerging markets, a prominent African delegate, cancelled abruptly due to a family emergency. With no backup lined up, the stage was suddenly vulnerable. Live broadcasts, news crews and dedicated investors alike waited in awkward silence. Panic flickered across the organizers' faces. A young Emirati aide eyed Trorore with desperation. Would he step in? The name and face meant nothing to him, but necessity trimmed down protocol, and the aide prompted, would the president of Burkina Faso deliver something on short notice? Trorore looked up, measured and composed, and replied, I'll need 3 minutes. The news spread, organizers exchanged relieved exhalations, the moderators glimpsed a possibility stronger than routine protocol. Trorore rose and walked to the podium. The BBC moderator introduced him almost apologetically, but the tone shifted as Trorore looked at the crowd, silent, focused and confident. He began, My country is not rich in oil. We don't have diamond mines that make headlines or gold reserves that attract multinationals. We don't have tech unicorns or billion-dollar startups. But we are rich in something far more valuable than all of those things, potential that isn't for sale to the highest bidder. He sourced from his jacket pocket a hand-drawn map, creased and detailed in colored inks. Revealed for what it truly was, a sovereign blueprint. As he unfurled it for all eyes to see, the bland, PowerPoint-driven atmosphere shattered. This was real, authentic, visionary, indigenous. He traced the contours of the West African Green Energy Corridor, solar and wind lines radiating across 10 nations, agricultural processing centers powered by renewables, transportation corridors anchoring landlocked economies to coastal markets. This initiative was not crafted by consultants, he said, it grew from villages, designed by local engineers, shaped by Burkina Faso soil and aspirations. The live media response turned immediate. Cameras re-angled. Reporters scribbled. Sponsors caught their breath. The quiet confidence with which he spoke, without slides, flashy visuals or tentpole endorsements, was revolutionary. He mapped practical details, drought-resistant crops nurtured by solar irrigation, domestic solar panel factories that would employ locals and power factories. Solar-powered logistics nodes built to move goods and people across borders without sacrificing sovereignty. His narrative was bold, yet granular, structured, credible, and undeniably sovereign. He paused at the 3-minute mark, but continued past 7 and 12, weaving humanity, ambition, realism. Around minute 15, he issued a challenge: you've heard of investing in Africa as a resource extraction or charity. I offer you equality. Genuine partnership. A sustainable ecosystem built collectively, mutually beneficial, mutually accountable. His tone was firm, his vision inclusive. The response? Silence. Attentive, collective, transformative silence. No polite applause, an engaged, mind-altering engagement. The audience leaned forward. Investors whispered into phones. CNN signaled urgency, the Financial Times pulled journalists from other assignments. Sheikh Mohammed, seated in the VIP section, rose steadily and moved toward the stage. His advisors closely followed. Their intuition, diplomatic vernacular, and wealth of experience converged on urgency. At 20 minutes, Trorore closed with a simple, "Thank you." The applause thundered, not perfunctory but profound. The moderator, rattled yet exhilarated, invited questions, but before Q&A could begin, the Sheikh's aides summoned the stage for private consultations. The diplomatic choreography resumed, only this time, the timelines and geographies transformed. The forum intermission refunded worlds. Delegates circled business cards with new intent, coffee meets transformed into potential partnerships, research teams recalibrated their morning agendas. Hashtags like #unexpectedleadership and #Afrosizing populated social media as Trorore retreated to a 42-floor consultation room. There, amidst porcelain Turkish coffee cups and dates more costly than gold, the real work began, the private negotiations, the trillion-dollar whispers, the commitments that textbooks would later call paradigm shifts. In that secluded summit, Sheikh Mohammed leaned in, voice confidential, and motioned, "Let's talk implementation." Trorore's map lay between them, lines scrawled in ink, children's handwriting from villages far from Dubai's skyscrapers, but right now, that map was the centerpiece of deals larger than the desert. Negotiations bridged ceilings and floors, sovereignty and investment, decades and dreams. Investors signed preliminary MOUs, memoranda of mutual understanding, for solar farms in Burkina Faso, agritech incubators powered by renewables, logistics corridors stretching through Mali, Niger, Ghana, even as Sheikh Mohammed quietly promised to help accelerate funding and remove regulatory barriers. Across that boardroom, a leader from one of the world's poorest nations negotiated from a position of dignity and vision. Investors no longer saw a small African outpost. They saw the nucleus of a modern economic web that reached billions of consumers and aligned with global sustainability trends. Their portfolios detected low-cost renewable entry points, their consciences recognized genuine impact. Mutual need had found alignment. By early afternoon, press releases went out. Agreements totaling $1.2 billion were announced, far more than Burkina Faso's annual government budget. The funds would initiate pilot solar parks, biogas plants, agricultural processing hubs and training centers powered by wind and sun. UAE-based sovereign wealth funds partnered with Burkina Faso, European green financiers joined, and Chinese engineering teams stood ready to assemble. The corridor's first phase, 10 gigawatts of renewable energy capacity networked across 5 nations, would set a model for African-led continental integration. Days later, Foreign Ministry analysts called it a watershed. Investors recalculated risk metrics. African civic leaders toasted diplomatic triumph. Enthusiasm spread across Francophone West Africa, a region historically marginalized in global dealmaking. Burkina Faso's GDP projections leapt, neighboring nations scrambled to craft their own corridor segments. Global forums took a fresh turn, emerging African leaders were no longer observers, they were architects. In Dubai, Sheikh Mohammed quietly added 10 extra advisory sessions to his afternoon with Trorore. Sovereign wealth deputies floated additional credit lines. Consortiums of private investors proposed agritech funds sized at hundreds of millions. Press analysts pivoted from skepticism to ambition. One Reuters headline summed it up: from sideline to center stage, Burkina Faso redefines African agency. Back in Ouagadougou, celebrations erupted. Media broadcasts hailed Trorore's courage. Citizens asked, how did one man do this in just 20 minutes? Politicians debated how to replicate such clarity in domestic policies. Civil society groups carved out new roles as local implementers. The promised renewable plants began to emerge in Arabinda and Kédougou. Workshops teaching irrigation powered by solar pumps took root. Railroad nodes between Ouagadougou and ports in Côte d'Ivoire were surveyed. Even before shovels touched soil, value was being created: investor confidence, human capital, civic pride, and a new global narrative. Dubai's skyline, that morning an emblem of ambition, had framed something far greater: the rebirth of African self-determination, led by a small country demanding equal footing. The map that Trorore sketched by hand became a symbol, not of extraction or aid, but of ownership and possibility. That $1.2 billion investment wasn't just capital, it was affirmation, recognition, and a template for hundreds of millions to follow. And so, the world's perspective shifted, not through charity or diplomacy, but through leadership. A 20-minute speech disrupted the flow of billions. It demanded no apology, no concession, only partnership, equality, and shared purpose. In that hall, a small leader from a small nation reframed what global power could and should do: working together, not for us.